Wanderer of the Wasteland, Chapter 16, Part 2. Adam marveled at this unquenchable spirit, this sublime effrontery of a woman, and he hesitated to dare to turn that spirit from its superb indifference. But this vacillation in him was weak. What a wonderful experience it would be to embody in Magdalene Veery the instinct, the strife, the nature of the desert. With her mind, if he had the power to teach, she would grasp the lesson in a single day. And lastly, her unforgettable implication, the crowning agony of what he might bring upon her. There could be only one interpretation of that: love. The idea thrilled him, but only with wonder and pity. It took possession of Adam's imagination. Well, such love might come to pass in the desert storms, bridged canyons with sand in one day. It was a place of violence. The elements waited not upon time or circumstance. The few women Adam had come in contact with on the desert had loved him. Even the one-eyed Mojave Joe, that hideous, unsexed, monstrous deformity of a woman whom he had left groveling in the sand at his feet, shamed at last before a crowd of idle, gaping, vile men, even she had awakened to this strange madness of love. But Adam had not wanted that of any woman since the poignant moment of his youth on the desert, when the dusky-eyed Margarita had murmured of love so fresh and sweet to him. Ah, so long ago and far away. Least of all did Adam want the love of Magdalene Veery. If she were young and I were young, or if she had never, even the possibilities, like might have beens, were useless dreams, but the die was cast. Serve Magdalene Veery he would, and teach her the secret of the strength of the sand wastes and the lonely hills, and that the victory of life was not to yield. Fight for her too, he would, in all the multiplicity of ways he had learned. He would fight. He'd fight the solitude and the loneliness of Death Valley, the ghastliness so inimical to the creative life of a woman, the heat, the thirst, the starvation, the poison air, the furnace wind, storm and flood and avalanche. Just as naturally, if need be, if it fatefully fell out so, he would lay his slaying hands in all their ruthless might upon the man who had made her dare her doom. When next morning at sunrise hour, Adam presented himself at the Veery camp, he was greeted by Mrs. Veery, seemingly a transformed woman. She wore a riding suit, the worn condition of which attested to the rough ride across the mountain. What remarkable difference it made in her appearance. It detracted from her height, and the slenderness of her, revealed rather than suggested by her gowns, showed much of grace and symmetry. She'd braided her hair and let it hang. When the sun had tanned her white face and hands, Magdalene Veery would really be transformed. Adam tried not to stare, but his effort was futile. "Good morning," she said with a bright smile. "Why, Mrs. Veery, I hardly knew you," he stammered. "Thanks. I feel complimented. It's the first time you've looked at me, shorn of my dignity. No, my worldliness. Do I begin, well, desert man? No more stuffy dresses clogging my feet, no more veils to protect my face. Let the sun burn. I want to work. I want to help. I want to learn. If madness must be mine, let it be a madness to learn what in this God-forsaken land ever made you the man you are. There, Sir Wansville, I have flung down the gauge." "Very well," replied Adam soberly. "And now," she continued, I am eager to work. If I blunder, be patient. If I am stupid, make me see. And if I faint in the sun or fall beside the trail, remember, it is my poor body that fails and not my will. So in the light of her keen interest, Adam found the humdrum mixing of dough and the baking of bread a pleasure and a lesson to him rather than a task. Ah, how important are the homely things of life, she said. A poet said we live too much in the world. I wonder, did he mean just this? We grow away from or never learn the simple things. I remember my grandfather's farm, the plowed fields, the green corn, the yellow wheat, the chickens, the garden, the mice in the barn, and the smell of hay, the smell of burning leaves, the smell of the rich brown earth. Once fell, not for years have I remembered them. Something about you, the way you worked over that bread, like a nice old country lady, made me remember. Oh, I wonder what I've missed. We all miss something. It can't be helped, but there are compensations and it's never too late. You are a child with all your bigness. You have the mind of a child. That's one of my few blessings. Now you try your hand at mixing the second batch of dough. She made a picture on her knees with her sleeves rolled up, her beautiful hands white with flour, her face beginning to flush. Adam wanted to laugh at her absolute failure to mix dough, and at the same moment he had it in him to weep over the earnestness, the sadness, the pathetic meaning of her. Eventually they prepared the meal, and she carried Veery's breakfast in to him. Then she returned to eat with Adam. I shall wash dishes, she announced. No, he protested. Then came a clash. It ended with a compromise, and from that clash, Adam realized he might dominate her in little things, but in a great conflict of wills, she would be the stronger. It was a step in his own slow education. There was a constitutional difference between men and women. Upon Adam's resumption of the work around the shack, Mrs. Veery helped him as much as he would permit, which by midday was somewhat beyond her strength. Her face sunburned rosily, and her hands showed the contact with dirt, and her boots were dusty. You mustn't overdo it, he advised. Rest and sleep during the noon hours. She retired within the shack and did not reappear till the middle of the afternoon. Meanwhile, Adam had worked at his task, trying at the same time to keep an eye on Veery, who wandered around aimlessly over the rock-strewn field, idling here and plodding there. Adam saw how Veery watched the shack, and when Magdalene came out again, he saw her and grew as motionless as the stone where he leaned. Every thought of Veery's must have been dominated by this woman's presence, the meaning of her, the possibilities of her, the tragedy of her. Oh, how I slept, she exclaimed. Is it work that makes you sleep? Indeed, yes. Ah, I see my noble husband standing like Mephistopheles, smiling at grief. What's he doing over there? I don't know unless it's watching you. He's been around like that for hours. Poor man, she said with both compassion and mockery. Watching me, what loss of precious time, and so futile. It is a habit he contracted some years ago. Once fell, take me down to the opening in the mountain there, so that I can look into Death Valley. Shall I ask Veery? Queried Adam in slight uncertainty. No, let him watch or follow or do as he likes. I am here in Death Valley. It was his cherished plan to bury me here. I shall not leave until he takes me, which will be never. For the rest, he is nothing to me. We are as far apart as the poles. On the way down the gentle slope, Adam halted amid sun-blasted shrubs, scarcely recognizable as greasewood. Here he knelt in the gravel to pluck some flower so tiny that only a trained eye could ever have spied them. One was a little pink flower with sage color and sage odor. Another a white daisy, very frail and without any visible leaves. And a third was a purple-red flower, half the size of the tiniest buttercup, and this had small dark green leaves. "Flowers in Death Valley," exclaimed Mrs. Veery in utter amaze. "Yes, flowers of a day. They sprang up yesterday. Today they bloom. Tomorrow they will die. I don't know their names. To me, their blossoming is one of the wonders of the desert. I think sometimes that it is a promise. A whole year the tiny seeds lie in the hot sands. Then comes a mysterious call, and the green plant shoots its inch-long stalk to the sun. Another day beauty unfolds, and there is fragrance on the desert air. Another day sees them wither and die." "Beauty and fragrance indeed they have," mused the woman. "Such tiny flowers to look and smell so sweet. I never saw their like. Flowers of a day. They indeed give rise to thoughts too deep for tears." Adam led his companion to the base of the mountain wall and around the corner of the opening so that they came suddenly and unexpectedly into full view of Death Valley. He did not look at her. He wanted to wait a little before doing that. The soft gasps which escaped her lips and the quick grasping of his hand were significant of the shock she sustained. Their position faced mostly down the valley. It seemed a vast level, gently sloping up to the borders where specks of mesquites dotted the sand, dull gray and flat. These league-wide wastes of speckled sand bordered a dazzling white sunlit belt, the winding bottom of the long bowl, a salty dead stream of Death Valley. Miles and miles below, two mountain ranges blended in a purple blaze, and endless slanting lines of slopes ran down to merge in the valley floor. The ranges sent down offshoots of mountains that slanted and lengthened into the valley. One bright green oasis that lost in the vastness was comparable to one of the tiny flowers Adam had plucked out of the sand, and it shone wonderfully and elusively out of the glare of gray and white. A dim, mystical scene. "Oh God, is it my grave?" cried Magdalene. "We're all destined for graves," replied Adam solemnly. "Could any grave elsewhere be so grand, so lonely, so peaceful? Now let us walk out a little way to the edge of that ridge and sit there while the sun sets." On this vantage point, they were out some distance in the valley, so that they could see even the western end of the Panamint Range, where a glaring sun had begun to change its color over the bold black peaks. A broad, shallow shadow lengthened across the valley and crept up the yellow foothills to the red Funeral Mountains. This shadow marvelously changed to purple, and as the radiance of light continued to shade, the purple deepened. Over all the valley at the western end appeared a haze, the color of which was nameless. Adam felt the lessening heat of the sinking sun. Half the blaze was gone. It had been gold and now was silver. He swept his gray gaze around jealously, not to miss the transformations, and his companion, silent and absorbed, instinctively turned with him. End of chapter 16, part 2.